Hi guys, my name is Atul Churamani and I'd like to welcome you to this session on deconstructing copyright in music, of course. Why are we doing this today? We're doing it because today is World Intellectual Property Day. I'm sure you don't know, but April 26th every year is World Intellectual Property Day. And for 2020, the theme actually is Innovate to Go Green, which means innovation in intellectual property to help arrest climate change. I'm doing my bit, as you can see. I'm wearing a green t-shirt, so I hope you guys do your bit as well. We need to arrest climate change. But today on World Intellectual Property Day, let's talk about copyright in music. And to do that, we have with us Amit Datta, who's one of the most respected copyright lawyers in the country and who has been a huge pillar of support to the music industry. He helped change and shape the Copyright Amendment of 2012, which was a landmark amendment, as you all know. He stood firmly by the side of the IPRS and has been instrumental in the changes that have come about. And these changes are something that we will talk about as we go along. So welcome, Amit. It's a pleasure to have you. And we are dying to hear a lot from you about copyright and how it works at the IPRS.
Thanks so much, Atul, and happy World Intellectual Property Day, even though we're in the lockdown with the upside and downside. But to all the people out there who are less privileged and are seeing the negative effects of life as it is. But I guess the world continues, and we must do the best we can.
Well, when you look at intellectual property, and it's all about creators and creation, so I think the lockdown might actually be a good time for these creators to be inspired, to have a little peace of mind, don't have to travel. You can sit and do a lot of work. And one of those is someone who's the other panelist on our show. I'm sure you all have heard of a lyricist called Manoj Muntashir. He's written some fabulous songs in movies like Kesari, Kabir Singh, and of course he wrote Galiyan, that incredible song. Manoj, thank you so much for making the time, joining us today to have a chat about intellectual property, music, etc. We're delighted to have you on the show.
Thank you, Adulji, for such a lovely introduction. I mean, this kind of intro is something that every writer dies for. So I'm glad. And Amit, very good to see you. You are our messiah in these days when the royalty has become such an important component and such a grave issue. So having someone like you, such a strong personality, just standing by our side makes us feel very strong. Thank you for being there.
Always a pleasure.
Absolutely, I fully agree with you. So Manoj, let's quickly cut to the reason why we are here. Boy from Amethi, such a famous place. What are you doing in Bombay?
I'm writing because I didn't know what else to do. I come from a place where everybody is a politician. I mean, the DNA of politics, you're born with it. So actually, I'm not exaggerating, as writers do. In fact, if you even ask a 7-year kid in Amethi that what do you have to say about the present political scenario, he will have a good answer to give you. He will not be quiet. So he has a point of view. So coming from there, of course, I had the urge to speak up my mind. And then poetry happened to me. Once poetry happened, I realized that I was heavily inspired by Sahid Ludhianvi and his work.
Wow.
And of course, I wanted to join the industry, which can give me a bigger platform, a bigger screen, a bigger expression to my thoughts. And that's the very reason, because coming back to the money matters, when I thought of writing songs and writing lyrics, so money was never on top of my mind. But with the time, I realized that you really can't turn your eyes away from it. It is something that brings dignity to you. It is something that brings it's a bare minimum necessity of life.
Right. So I'll back you up a little bit, Manoj. So when you were writing in Amethi, when you were growing up, were you writing only song lyrics? Were you writing short stories? What exactly were you writing?
I was writing poetry. So I never wrote songs as such. I was writing basically ghazal, nazm. That is the format, and that is where you start from. Because
Okay.
writing songs is something once you join film industry, and then there is a situation, then there is a tune, a melody to it. Then those ghazals and nazms take kavita ka or geet ka roop. But before
Geet Karu.
that, it is nazm, it is poetry, it is ghazal, not geet.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you landed up in Bombay. I'm not sure with a haversack or not, but what happened? I mean, what did you do first? What was your first professional assignment?
Struggle to some great extent, because I mean there are various struggle stories. I remember Javed Akhtar Sahab in one of his interviews said a very special thing, and that completely speaks for me as well. He said कि मुझे कोई जानलेवा बीमारी नहीं हुई, मेरे ऊपर से ट्रक नहीं गुजर गई, मैं मर नहीं गया, इसके अलावा जितना बुरा हो सकता है वो सब हुआ मेरे साथ.
Okay, so we'll go past that because that's a story for another day. But what was the
Yeah.
first professional assignment that you got for writing? Was it for a movie?
I started writing for television. No, movies came very later in my life.
Okay.
I started writing for television, and before I could blink my eyes, I became, thankfully, the most sought after writer in television mainly because of Mr. Bachchan, because I wrote KBC, I wrote every reality show which you have seen from 99 or probably 2000 to 2014 or 15. I can say that 60-70% were solely written by me. So that
Okay,
happened.
So you were writing scripts, you were writing dialogues, stuff like that. Scripts.
Yeah.
And what happens when you're writing scripts? You get paid one time by the producer of the show, and that's it.
That's it. It is one-time payment. Yeah, of course.
And this is what you expected when you came from Amethi to Bombay, and you said, "I'm going to write, and I'm going to write for the industry." Did you expect to earn money like this? That I'll write something, someone will pay me for it, and that's the end of the story?
In fact, as I told you earlier, Atul, money was not on top of my mind. I just wanted to write. So that is my fact. But yes, later, as everything graduated and as I walked ahead in life, I realized that money is an important factor. But television is one medium which pays you very well. So probably none of us can actually complain that we are underpaid in television. Depending on what is your worth, of course, you get paid handsome money. But what happened? I mean, you will ask that question later, so I should not jump to it. But then there is a huge difference in the setup of cinema and television, writing songs and writing scripts. Writing songs is something that gives you recurring money, that gives you I mean, you just don't get paid once. It keeps happening every quarter, 4 times in a year. So that's a great thing to happen.
So when did you first learn about the fact that you could get money? And someone must have used the term royalty, and you thought of the Queen of England or something like that. But when did you actually understand that there was this recurring money that would come to you when you wrote lyrics?
In 2015. Because 2014, I got my first big hit, that was Galiyan, as you just mentioned. So once I wrote Galiyan, and this is something that will inspire everybody who's listening to us right now, I mean, the floodgates opened. Before I could blink my eyes, I had every producer on my doorstep. I mean, in 1 year, I was writing about 100 songs, which is a huge number. Yeah, so that kept happening. And all of a sudden, I realized that, yes, I am making some difference. There is whatever I'm writing, it has got a value of being sold. It has got some commercial value. So why not I get some money in return? Why am I just paid once? कि एक certain amount मिल गया और मेरी कहानी खत्म हो गई. I was not too sure about IPRS because IPRS probably in those days was dissolved. I'm talking about 2015. It was not acting as a body. But yes, I was told by someone that you are eligible for royalties, and then I enrolled to another body, and then later IPRS, and now it makes I mean, a very distinguished chunk in my income.
That's fantastic to hear. So let's go across to Amit now and ask Amit. So this seems to be a bit of a strange thing with this intellectual property business, because I'm looking at it from the point of view that if I'm a builder and I'm building property, which is physical property, and I sell that property I sell it once, as Manoj sold his scripts for KBC, why would I then get recurring money on that property that I built?
I think, Atul, that's a very good question. Probably, also asked, and I'm sure it's resounded with you as well, given you've been in the business for so long, and with Manoj as well. I think we make a mistake in, measuring bricks and mortar with the same rule as we measure copyrights with. These are two separate functions altogether. A brick and mortar building is a brick and mortar building. You can't then split it back. A copyright, a lyric, something beautiful that Manojji writes, can be used in multiple ways, can be used at multiple occasions, can be used in one sound recording and used in 1,000 sound recordings after that. And so, therefore, the nature of copyright and intangible assets has to be understood. I remember in a case, frustratingly, the argument on the opposite side was, if I buy bananas, milk, and sugar from 3 different people and I make a banana milkshake, how can they come and ask for royalty when I'm selling the banana milkshake? And I think a very sound, very base level but sound response to that, given ironically by a criminal lawyer friend of mine, is then give me the bananas back if you don't get royalty. Now that's where copyright differs from physical property, and I have to admit that it needed a criminal lawyer to come back with that base level logic. A very good friend of mine, as opposed to me coming out, with that logic. But I think it's telling, and it kind of, I hope it answers your question as to.
So I actually have been very curious about this because we both have a common friend called Achille Fowler, who's a Frenchman, and he claims that this whole copyright, pay me for performance, etc., started in France. Now, if it had been a German saying that it started in France, I would have believed it instantly. So I'm a little curious whether a Frenchman saying a Frenchman started it actually is correct. So I'm going to ask you, is this true that somewhere around the 1800s, 1840s or 50s or something, this actually happened? A composer went into a restaurant, had a coffee, and someone was sitting at a piano playing his song. And he refused to pay for the coffee, saying that, why should I pay you when I'm using your product, when you are using my product and not paying me? Is this really the genesis of where it all started?
Well, absolutely. On a lighter note, Achille, like most Frenchmen, he's a dear friend of both of us, and well known he's more Indian than French, I argue, except for his accent, which he somehow held on to after 35 years in India. But on a lighter note, I think all Frenchmen believe everything has originated from France. But in the case of copyright, there's a bit of a distinction here. Copyright actually originated, historically, whether you had it from the Roman times or even I read some time back in the Talmudic traditions, even in Jewish religious texts, you had some sort of doctrine of privilege or monopoly over text and words in text. And you had a basis to argue moral rights and economic rights of people who authored books, etc. And this came from ancient times. And you had a whole system of privileges and all in Europe in the Middle Ages, more to control the printing press and who could use the printing press, because the fear was that knowledge would empower the lower class masses. And then ultimately it culminated in 1710 into what in England, what is unfortunately for Achille, what is known as the Statute of Anne, or the first copyright, which gave 10-year copyright in books, and that gradually developed. But you're absolutely right. It's the collective management and the copyright society. You had Bourget, who was a famous composer, who Les Ambassadeurs was a famous restaurant or cafe in Paris, who, after his meal with 2 other friends, decided to walk out because he had not been paid for the music. And that 2 years later culminated in Beaumarchais, who again was a famous composer with 22 other people got together, and they set up a authors society called SADC in France. And then 2 years later, I think by 1849, 1850, you had SACEM, which is still working today. And then that led to the German Copyright Society, and in 1914 PRS in the UK. So the collective management philosophy, famously headlined by Victor Hugo, which finally culminated in the Berne Convention, certainly came from France, but unfortunately copyright is more of a Commonwealth.
थोड़ा slow. हम जैसे लोग भी हैं, we are also listening, so we have to be guided through this step by step. Okay, so you're saying that number one, Ashil is right. So you and I owe him a beer for trying to take the mickey out of him. He was telling the truth, so we have to give Ashil a beer.
He probably wants a wine though.
Right, done. Next is that you are saying that there was a society set up first for people like Manoj who were writing and composing, and not for singers and music labels and stuff like that. Because anyway, the gramophone records came out later in the next century, I think.
1936, 37 was the first recognition.
There we go.
The gramophone.
So this society that was set up or rather, let's talk about the Berne Convention, because we also need to keep this slightly short. So 1886, we had the Berne Convention, where they got together and said that works created by composers and authors needed to be protected, right? But how were they going to protect this? What exactly was going to happen? What did the Berne Convention say?
So, taking a lot from the European tradition, and I would fault the Commonwealth or the English tradition. The English said there's an economic right. There wasn't a focus on the author. The European tradition, particularly French and the Germanic tradition, the civil law tradition, was the primary person is the author. And the Berne Convention focused on the author. It was not until the 1960s, when you had the Rome Convention to protect sound recordings, that some focus came on the sound recording. So
I'm interrupting, that the Berne Convention really was about the creators. And by 1961, when Rome happened, by then the music labels, because there was a physical format that was selling well, there were broadcast organizations that had come in, and performers had started to become so popular.
Yes.
That's why they actually, the Rome Convention kind of protected the phonogram, and the composers and authors were protected much earlier by the Berne Convention, right?
Yeah.
So under the Berne Convention, it is about the composition and lyrics under which these copyright societies were set up, including bodies like the IPRS. Is that right?
Correct.
So what exactly were they looking to do? What did they want to do? What did these bodies want to do?
So, the logic is a standout artist and creator like Manoj, for instance, who wishes to benefit and get royalties, right? Could theoretically go himself and collect royalties from people and make his own money. Theoretically, that sounds really good.
Which people are we talking about?
A composer or a lyricist. Let us start with that juncture. So I'm trying to explain the logic of why collective management works.
Right.
And the logic is, Manoj can't be expected, he will spend too much of money, transaction costs, in trying to recover from the thousands of places where his music may be played. Now, a smaller artist or somebody who's just started out in the profession, who has maybe one or two songs, his works are included in this big, lovely blanket license that a copyright society gives, right? Which can more effectively, logically so, license everybody's works and at the marketplace in a much easier fashion. It does not require the individual owner or the author to then have to spend money to do that themselves. That's the logic on the owner or the creator side. The logic on the market side is there is a single window license. There's a blanket of millions of works, tens of millions of works. Like IPRS today has a cumulative of more than 25 million works, counting international works, right? So that blanket license is given at one cost. So each work is valued at the same level. Whether it's a 1970s song, it's a one-off hit, It's a string of hits. They're all valued at that one level. Everybody makes the same amount of money, and there for the marketplace, they don't have to go and negotiate for a new song. I'll have to pay much
Correct.
more. Older song, I'll have to pay much less. The transaction, so that's the logic of the copyright system.
Correct. So the society is, as I'm hearing it, they're licensing for public performance. So when Manoj's work is getting played in shops and bars and establishments and discotheques, etc., that is what IPRS collects for.
Correct. It also licenses the mechanical.
It's called the performing right, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you said it also licenses the mechanical right.
Correct.
Now, what exactly is this mechanical right?
So the public performance right, as we know, Atul, in India, is actually, this is an industry term. So we'll say public performance. Public performance means when there is a live performance in India, live performance is known as public performance. Then there is communication to the public, television broadcasts, radio broadcasts, etc. So all of these are communication to the public right, public performance. It is from an industry perspective called PP, or the public performance right. The other right is the right of reproduction and storage, which in today's world, you take online streaming, limited downloads, tethered downloads, subscriber downloads, all of that is critical, right? Where OTT and television, etc. are concerned. So the reproduction and the storage right it's the second right that IPRS licenses in its new avatar, post 2017, when it was re-granted registration, it was re-registered, it complied with the new law, the authors and the publishers. It was fantastic. Everybody sitting together on the board, working together, etc. And so IPRS now licenses the public performance right and the mechanical copyright.
And the mechanical right. So again, now, Manoj, so you're getting royalties from IPRS, which covers your songs when they get streamed. It covers your songs when they get played in establishments. Okay,
Right.
But I want to come back to what you said about writing scripts and dialogues for KBC, etc. Right? So you don't get any royalties for that?
No, because we are told that this thing is different. I mean, my KBC dialogues are not being played in some club, in some pub, or in some performance. But then I have to come back to that point. Why do not I get any royalty for a film as big as Bahubali, जिसके dialogues मैंने लिखे? I don't get 1 rupee royalty for my dialogues. But the movie is getting reruns after reruns. It is like playing on all OTT platforms. It is being played everywhere. So don't I have a right on that money, a little bit share on that money also, because my producers are getting paid for it. This is not just about me. This is about everyone who is writing dialogues, who is writing stories, who is writing screenplays. I think, and I mean, Mr. Amit Datta has to enlighten me if I'm thinking wrong, but I truly believe that this should also fall under the umbrella of royalty. Why not?
Amit, all yours.
Well, I in my view, the distinction industries try to draw is very fine point. वो nuance वाली बात होती है. And in my view, royalties are payable for any work that is utilized. That's the essential thrust of the argument. Now, the argument that the industry has taken is that royalty right, क्योंकि 18 में literary work लिखा हुआ है और musical work लिखा हुआ है, dramatic work नहीं लिखा हुआ है, script और screenplay dramatic work में आता है. So that's why royalty is not payable for script and screenplay.
One sec.
But
so is it not payable at all, or is it not payable by IPRS, which governs, let's say, the music?
So IPRS does not administer the rights in dialogues or screenplays or scripts. The two works IPRS administers are the lyrics, musical works, or rather musical works and the lyrics associated with those musical works. So
but if I remember correctly, there used to be.
I wish IPRS were. I think it would have done a really good job.
Yeah, but there used to be a society called Script, which used to, which was recognized by the government, and it used to collect, I believe, for dialogues, etc. Dialogues, scripts, screenplays, etc. Is that correct?
वो एक्चुअली इट वाज स्टिल बॉर्न। वो जब सरकार ने किसी को भेजा वहाँ चेक करने के लिए, तो अपेरेंटली वहाँ वॉचमैन भी नहीं था, तो वो चली नहीं।
Okay, so
मुझे
but it's recognized as a separate class of work which somebody like Manoj could become a member of if we had a seat, right? And he would, as he was pointing out, because it is recurringly played, he could get royalties of his dialogues and scripts, etc. Right?
Absolutely. In fact, there is an application pending. Currently, there's an application pending.
Because what I, if you may allow, Atul, I just have just to add one thing कि अगर हम एक बहुत ही यूजर फ्रेंडली लेमेंस पर्सपेक्टिव से देखते हैं इस पूरी चीज को, ओके, सो देयर इज ह्यूज अमाउंट ऑफ नॉलेज इन्वॉल्वड विद इट एंड everything, but okay, just let me come from a layman's point of view that why royalty, why? So the answer to that why would be very simple कि सिस्टम को भी ये पता है कि जो राइटर है, जो लिखता है, जो गाने लिखता है, जो कहानियां लिखता है, जो किस्से लिखता है, वो जो मेन स्ट्रीम धारा है लोगों की उससे थोड़ा अलग है. He is living in his own world, he is living in his own la la land, and he is incapable of generating that amount of money जो कि एक नॉर्मल आदमी बिजनेस करके, रोजगार करके, नौकरी करके, धंधा करके कमा सकता है. But the contribution of this person who is a writer is huge, it's tremendous to the society. So इस contribution के बदले उसको एक dignified जिंदगी जीने का जरिया तो मिलना ही चाहिए. Probably that would have been the entire concept, that why royalty. So the royalty comes in picture there. ये आदमी कंट्रीब्यूट कर रहा है, सोसाइटी को बहुत बड़ा कंट्रीब्यूशन है, लेकिन ये पैसे नहीं कमा सकता क्योंकि ये जिस तरह, सिनेमा तो बहुत बात की चीज है, जो कमर्शियल राइटिंग है वो भी बहुत बात की चीज है. हम सब जानते हैं कि किताबों से स्पेशली हिंदी राइटर्स को कितना आता है, देयर इज हार्डली एनी मनी. तो ये चीज जो है ये तो सिर्फ लिरिक्स राइटर्स पे लागू नहीं होती है. ये जो लाला लैंड में रहने वाली बात है, ये जो अपनी दुनिया में रहने वाली बात है, सो दिस इज कंप्लीटली वैलिड फॉर स्क्रीन राइटर्स ऑल्सो, दिस इज वैलिड फॉर डायलॉग राइटर्स ऑल्सो. सो आई have, I mean, not a demand as such, but I truly feel from the bottom of my heart that my friends who are writing scripts, they should also be compensated for their efforts and for their time.
Absolutely.
Definitely. So, good point, Manoj. But I also just wanted to ask you, Amit. So, you said we were talking about songs. So, what happens to people like Manoj when they write, let's say, a jingle? If they're writing a jingle for Cadbury's and people compose those songs. So, there are jingles that are there. There is a background score which composers do for movies. There are themes that are written for television, serials, etc. So these also, I believe, are covered by the Copyright Act and need to be paid for. They need to earn royalties and be paid for. So does IPRS do this as well?
Absolutely. IPRS does. And IPRS collects for background, has started collecting for background. I won't look, the thing is that the Indian copyright system in the Indian industry, Atul, as you know, and Manoj, as you know, having dealt with the pehla question jo tha, aapko ek lump sum milta hai. This is at complete odds with the worldwide system. Worldwide system में क्या हुआ कि जब ऑथर पहले आया और ऑथर एसोसिएशन था पहले, तो जब वो डेवलप हुआ, तो जब साउंड रिकॉर्डिंग और फिल्म आया, तो ऑथर एसोसिएशन थे वहां जिन्होंने कॉन्ट्रैक्टिंग पे फाइट करी, नेगोशिएट करा, सब करा. तो एक इंडस्ट्री प्रैक्टिस हुआ. अब वो रॉयल्टी राइट, वहां पे लॉ में रॉयल्टी राइट नहीं है, इट्स अ कॉन्ट्रैक्चुअल डिस्पोजिशन, प्राइवेट कॉन्ट्रैक्ट. और एल्टन जॉन को पैसा मिलता है, छोटे आदमी को कम मिलता है, पर मिलता है. अब इसमें डिफरेंस ये था कि इंडिया में, कभी मैं सोचता हूं तो इंडिया में क्या हुआ, ये हिस्टोरिकल, मे बी आई एम रॉन्ग, बट इंडिया में बिफोर ऑथर एंड कंपोजर्स वर कमर्शियल, you had the sound recording and the film industry that commercialized. You had film studios, you had the phonogram industry, you had the old gramophone or the gramophone company of India, you had the Polydors who were there. They were the business. Your author and composers were not, they were not unionized, they didn't have an association, there was no bargaining. And so an industry practice started. ये आपको इंटरेस्ट होगा इसमें, 1955 में जब हमारा नया लॉ आ रहा था, तो एक इंग्लिश लॉ में 1914 के लॉ में एक क्लॉज था 19, जिसमें ये प्रोविजन था कि 25 साल के असाइनमेंट के बाद वो राइट ऑथर को रिवर्ट कर जाएगा. वो वापस चले जाएगा। 25 साल का ही असाइनमेंट होता था। तो जब ये बात चली कि ये क्लॉज हमारे नए लॉ में लगाएं, तो इंडस्ट्री ने अश्योरेंस दिया, दे गिव एन अश्योरेंस कि नहीं नहीं देखिए, रेडियो आ गया है, सिनेमा आ गया है, we will ensure that revenue is given. This is there in the standing committee report of 1955. We will assure you, we don't need this clause. And barely 20 years later, we were arguing whether he is an employee और फिल्म प्रोड्यूसर का सारा ओनरशिप होता है, सब होता है, एक्सेट्रा। और 20 साल भी नहीं लगे ऑथर कंपोजर को एकदम साइडलाइन कर दिया। जब तक इंग्लिश कॉपीराइट लॉ था, आयरॉनिकली एक ट्राइब इंस्लेव नहीं था, वो था ऑथर कंपोजर। ये बड़ा आयरॉनिक चीज है।
Yeah, but Amit, so yes, of course, there was industry practice, but so in my view, what happened was that record labels set up business. We didn't have homegrown labels. The Gramophone Company of India came in from EMI in the UK.
Yes.
Polydor came in, etc., etc. So the international label setup, the international publishers did not. So that was the difference, because if the publishers had set up also, then the composers and authors would have been on an equal footing. Anyway, but
in fact, yeah,
I think so I'll just ask the next question, Manoj, because in my understanding from what all Amit has said, the composition and lyric is supposed to be the primary work.
Right.
A lot of stuff, including the sound recording, is called a derivative work. Matlab, original is the composition lyric, jo aap karte ho, and then the sound recording, which has been the driving force of the music industry. So it's ironic that the labels have actually driven this business and made it what it is, and not the publishing business. So I just want to ask you, yesterday we were talking to Simon Moore from Cobalt, one of the largest music publishers in the world, and we were talking about mechanical royalties and rates. So mechanical royalties everywhere seem to be pick a number between 5 and 15%, more likely in the region of around 8. Why is this that what is considered a primary right should be earning possibly the least in the value chain? What's the logic? How does it work?
I mean, that is something that I wish I had an answer for that, but I can definitely have a wish. Now, listen, there has been, because you raised that topic, so there has been some voices that why do singers not get royalties? तो मैं हमेशा एक बात सोचता था कि जब हम creation की बात करते हैं, the word creation for any song, and with due respect to all my singer friends, they are all like my family, my extended family, and our songs would never be the same without those singers. But the fact is, गाना create कौन करता है? Out of thin air, completely out of thin air. So there is a composer who will sit with his guitar, play some note. There is a writer who will just come up with some nonsense like यहीं डूबे दिन मेरे, यहीं होते हैं सवेरे, and the song is generated. Singer is the third person in that entire system. Singer comes, the notations are being told by the composer, the words are being given by the writer. So the singer sings something which is already there. He has never been a part of the like giving birth to a song. Singer does not give birth to a song, and it should not be taken with any kind of disrespect for them. They are not giving birth to the song.
Let me give you another example over here. When Manoj,
I'm the comment section to blow up, Manoj.
No, sorry, what? I couldn't hear. I just couldn't hear. Am I
आपके पीछे सब डंडे लेके आ रहे? No, but I have another example. So Manoj, when you write a lyric, when you write a piece of poetry, you are a lyricist, you are a composer.
Yeah.
But जब आप stage पे जाते हो and you recite that poetry, you're as much a performer as Arijit Singh is when he sings one of the songs. Right. So you are also a performer. So there is a very thin line between the creators and the performers. And that is something, yes, the Copyright Act has to kind of generate. But I just want to come back to the question, and let me ask it to Amit, because I think Manoj has said his
sorry. If you give me 1 second, I have to talk about it. I am a creator first, and I can perform, but the performer cannot create. It cannot happen vice versa.
Fair enough. So that's the basis of my question. that why is it that the mechanicals, etc. See, performing may 50% goes to the composer author and 50% goes to the business entity which has invested and pushed it, etc., etc., the publisher. Why is it that for the mechanical, the writers get only, let's say, between 5 and 10, 12%?
Well, I think again, Atul, this is something that is developed mainly in the West. And by way of example, and this is a question I ask constantly, because I can assure you, as you may know, some of the practices in the music industry are, everybody knows why, but nobody knows how. And one of the understanding that I have got, or realizations that I came to, was in the West, the contracting or the private contracting tradition or practices around mechanical rights were initially limited to the pressing of the record album and the distribution of the record album. And that's where the mechanical royalty came from originally. So that was always a little bit, which was more of a token. The performance bit was the heavy bit. That's where money was made by artists, etc., etc. When live performances grew, they made much more money. And over a period of time, I don't think anybody actually even paid attention to the mechanical royalty side. You have that famous story of the Robbie Williams contract, which he negotiated with EMI, I think some 80 million pounds or something. And he said, I want a maximum on live performance on my digital, but I want, he gave up a lot on his mechanical, on his reproduction right side, etc., etc. And when he was doing 4 or 5 shows, he started doing 6 or 7 shows, and he had recouped that advance in a comparatively whatever, I mean, there's a legend.
Let me clarify.
For lawyers, just to finish, for lawyers, I think the mechanical right is something that the West and the way contracting practices have developed over the West, there is no standard bar. Now, if you go to the UK, which was talking about what royalty is payable in 2007, UK Royalty Court, the tribunal, on online distribution and streaming, they said 8 and 12% will be that thing. And they compared it to the sound recording royalty. They say it can't be lower. These rights are not inferior or superior to each other. That's what our Supreme Court also said. These rights are not inferior or superior to each other. Which is why in our law, whether it's performance or mechanical, the split is 50-50. It's not 10% or 15% or 5%. It's 50-50. Now, how that is broken up eventually is a different thing altogether.
Yeah. So, two things. One is that the mechanical royalty rates are also governed by an international apex body. They are not rates that are set individually by any country.
Sure.
So there is a BIEM which is responsible for the mechanical rate that runs country to country, and normally all countries have the same rate except for the US in the physical era, which had a different kind of connotation, but it used to end up in around the same area. And the logic, Manoj, this is stupid. I'm asking a question and I'm answering it. But anyway, forgive me for that. But the logic is that the business developed mechanical royalties was, as Amit said, these were about royalties that were paid for the underlying works when the physical product was pressed. So LPs were pressed, cassettes were manufactured, CDs were pressed. At that time, from the factory itself, that 5%, 8% of the retail price used to go out to the publishers, who used to pay the composers and lyric writers. The reason is that when you look at many songwriters, they are not performers. So one of the biggest example is a lady called Diane Warren, who has written probably #1 hits for every popular star in the world, starting from, I think, the mid 80s or so till today. She writes #1 songs for everyone. She does not perform. She's never got on a stage. So the fact is, they write songs and they write songs and they write songs. The people who are paying the mechanical royalty, which is the record labels, they're making a huge investment into that recording and into the promotion of that recording, normally with a performer. So Dan Warren writes for Bon Jovi. Universal is promoting Bon Jovi. They're spending millions. Robbie Williams in Amit's case. So Robbie Williams is being paid this huge $80 million advance on 4 albums, which he's supposed to deliver. So there is a lot of money to be recovered. Now, if you went to EMI, who was paying Robbie 80 million to record and to come up with the work, and you told him, listen, you also had to pay 25 to 30% to the composer and writer, because Robbie writes very few songs. These are written by other people. Then what and how would the record label recover the money? The cost of promotion, remember that, the cost of promotion is always much higher than the cost of creating the record. So in a very simple way, people always talk about, मैंने गाना तो record कर दिया laptop पे, अब मुझे video shoot करना है. Can I get a video done cheaply for 30,000 rupees or 40,000 rupees? Your recording has cost even less than that. So therefore, if you have very, very large payouts on things like the underlying works, then see, the businesses go hand in hand. You can't delineate them. Wherever the sound recording goes, the composition and lyrics have to go. But the composition and lyrics can go without the sound recording. When we do Antakshari, this, that, and the other, we're not using the sound recording. Live shows don't have sound recordings. So there's a balance that the business needs to find. And the logic is always that Manoj is going to write far more songs for many more people than a singer is going to actually sing. So the career of the Beatles was 220 songs. They did only 220 songs. The fact that 190 out of them were super hits is probably slightly different, but that's the logic of the business, right?
Well, Atul, sorry to interrupt, but there's a quick point I want to make. Indian music industry had 70 years to meet a balance in ensuring that you had robust contracting practices where author-composers benefited, were part of the ecosystem, much like the Western counterparts, and in fact, Indian companies, Indian subsidiaries of international companies. So it wasn't rocket science. For 70 years, that didn't happen. And which is why the law had to step in and bring in what I, as a lawyer, will firstly say that yes, it's a heavy heel. Whenever you bring in a law which says 50-50, it's a heavy heel. It's not never going to be a light heel. The point is that when you're looking at where we are in a COVID-like situation, and you're looking at how the world has changed, my fear is that we will go back to the same old.
Also, we have to understand that what drives the business is film music. Now, Manoj has been talking about the songs he's written. We know him because of the film songs. Right, so we didn't have a robust non-film business, but that is changing now with the independent scene being so strong, and that is why one encourages all independent composers and writers, the singer-songwriters, to become members of IPRS, because there is a royalty that you're going to get. Manoj has just said that he gets a fair amount of royalty. Yes, he writes film songs, and yes, the Beatles did not write film songs, but they probably are the maximum earners on royalty of songs, because your songs have to be hit.
More money than.
Yeah, you have to write hit songs. If you've written 150 songs and no hits, your checks are much smaller. Go ahead, Manoj.
Right. The problem is that there has been some issue with the distribution of the money or with collecting the money. Otherwise, why would someone like Khem Chandra Prakash, who has been a legend, जिसने आएगा आने वाला, जो गाना हम आज तक, अगर आप 50s के गानों की बात करो, आज 2020 में बैठे हुए हैं, but even a kid knows that there is a song by this name, आएगा आने वाला, from Mahal. What happened that there is a story that I heard a couple of years back that some money came and IPRS was only, the money came to IPRS wanted to give the money, it was 15,000 rupees. So 15,000 रुपए देने किसको हैं? Who are the kings of the composer? There was a search, there was a lookout. His wife was found begging at the Malad station. She was begging. और तब उनको 15,000 रुपए दिए गए. अब मुझे problem ये है कि is this how we deal with these legends? Is this how we deal with the people who gave us countless great emotions, countless great songs? So actually, from a very emotional point of view, I won't talk law at all. I won't talk law at all. I won't talk anything at all. But we have been unfair. As a country, as a nation, we have been unfair to them. And I'm very glad that now IPRS is into action. Now things are happening. Now there's a speedy post. Now somebody like Manoj Muntashir can actually sit and speak these magical words that yes, I get royalty and that royalty forms a fair chunk of my income. That's a great thing to say.
Wonderful.
I am I mean,
Correct.
I
That's really
I
heartwarming.
speak this.
That's really
Yeah, it's very heartwarming.
And see, Manoj,
Great.
you've answered one of Amit's questions, which is that see the labels never contracted with the composers and writers for popular music, because it was the
Right.
film producer who contracted with them, and then assignments went out to the labels. So the labels actually never even talked to the composers and writers. Their royalties in the olden days, very olden days, were built in, and then it stopped when the outright system came into play. But
Right.
today, again, and I reiterate this, because IPRS has revamped and because we are seeing a very sizable independent music scene, it is not all about film music today. Yes, film music still is the most popular and it drives the business, but there are many opportunities thanks to the digital world and a lot of independent artists coming in. So if they were to become members of IPRS, and I'm sorry I sound like such a champion for IPRS, but I've always very firmly believed in this, that anyone who writes a song, anyone who creates a piece of work, please register with the society. Otherwise, societies worldwide are mandated to give that money away to other people in 3 years. So you
I
must
know
become
that.
members. You must collect your royalties, no matter how small they are. Go ahead,
And
Manoj.
let me take this opportunity and appeal to all the writer friends of mine who have, many of them have hardly started. किसी के 2 गाने हैं, किसी के 3 गाने हैं, बट मैं आज इस प्लेटफॉर्म के जरिए कहना चाहता हूं कि ये एक शुरुआत है. अगर आज आप IPRS के साथ रजिस्टर होते हैं, एनरोल होते हैं, you have got somebody who is taking care of your share. You have got somebody who is standing by your side, who is asking for the money that you deserve, and they make sure that they collect money from every possible nook and corner and they deposit in your account. It's a great thing, my friend. अगर अब तक आप IPRS के member नहीं बने हैं, you are missing out on something. Please do it right away.
Achha, I think we're sounding too much like torch bearers for IPRS. Amit's been
But it's a
doing all
fact.
the work. So let's do one thing. I think there are people who have some questions. So if the host has seen any questions, are there any questions that we can answer? Otherwise, I can talk to these guys about contracts and stuff like that as well, which is also a very interesting discussion. But let's see if we have any questions. Guys, any questions up?
Vishal Agrawal, VKS, yeah.
VKS, what category does streaming live on social networks fall under? And is there a way to pay a monthly fee and subscribe to that copyright breakdowns can be avoided? Amit, this is all yours.
Wow. Basically, the category is live streaming is public performance, basically.
Okay.
A combination of public plus communication to the public. These are the rights that are implicated.
And these will be licensed by the society.
It will be licensed by the society if it comes within the repertoire of the society.
Okay.
Very clearly, a copyright society in India is as good as its members and the assignments of its members of their works to that copyright society. That's a finite, by definition, a finite number of works. They may be millions, but they are finite. Right. And the second is the way to pay a monthly fee is subscribe so that copyright lockdowns can be avoided. I highly doubt that the music industry would be interested in that, though I suspect that there is a nice monetization angle here to avoid copyright takedowns is what I think you mean. But I think copyright blockdowns are a combination of ensuring that where monetization channels are already carrying content, they are protected. Certain versions of music which are not conducive in the view of the owner of copyright, or sometimes the author, is taken down, etc. So I doubt that there is a monthly fee that allows you. However, some UGC platforms, large UGC platforms, already have licenses from multiple copyright labels, which allows them to host UGC content like version recordings, etc., etc. And they also try and manage what kind of takedowns are possible as much as possible. So, it may be possible there, but I highly doubt there is a way to pay a monthly fee and subscribe so that you can avoid a takedown.
Right. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, my son writes and composes songs and releases on DistroKid. Sorry, is it still required for him to register in IPRS? Manoj, you take that.
DistroKid, I have no idea what it is, but it is definitely a place where the music is being propagated. So definitely, जहाँ भी music commercialize हो रहा है, because the moment you release your music, no matter how less or how more money it is garnering, but it is definitely making money. So of course, if you get registered with the IPRS, then it is the responsibility of IPRS to make sure that in every way your work is being exploited, उसका पैसा आपके account में पहुंचे. So my answer is yes, it has to be done.
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay, we have Kazad. Why are music label members of IPRS? Why cannot the authors of works retain entire royalty? Amit, I think that you should do.
Music labels are members of IPRS wearing their hat. Worldwide, you'll have Sony BMG, which is the sound recording owner, and you have Sony ATV, which is the publishing arm. You have Universal, the same way split. That split between the publisher and the master rights business was not very typical in India, at least to Indian labels. So music labels, when they are members of IPRS, they are members wearing their hat as a music publisher. Now, as to your question as to why can't authors of works retain their entire royalty, theoretically, yes, authors can retain and negotiate their contracts. Practically, authors don't negotiate their contracts because if they start negotiating contracts, retaining rights, etc., there is a blowback from the entire production community. Don't work with this person. Blacklist this person. So therefore, hence the royalty right. And that's where I make it a point to tell people why this royalty right. The understanding was that contracting practices which are ingrained for 70 years are unlikely to change. Because they are unlikely to change, irrespective of whether all your rights have been assigned by you because you have no choice, because you want to continue to work in the industry. You don't want to be known as a political rabble-rouser standing on a soapbox, right? So therefore, you assign your rights almost in terms of the contract you are given. You hardly negotiate it. वकीलों के पेट पे आप लोग लात मारते हो, पर क्या करें, आप नेगोशिएट कर लेते हो. एक बार आप नेगोशिएट नहीं करते हो रादर और आप साइन कर देते हो, आपका रॉयल्टी राइट मिलेगा. So theoretically, there's no question, you can. Practically, it doesn't work that way.
So if I can just add to that, I think Amit has explained the situation when you are signing for a film, especially. If you are an independent singer-songwriter, then you are the owner of the work. You will get 100% of the royalty as a music publisher and a composer author. So when you're self-releasing music, 100% is yours. If you sign with a music label or a publisher, then you will get your writer's share, composer author share, and the entity, whether a publisher or a label, if it's a label representing the publishing, they will get the publisher's share. So like Amit said, it is not anybody's to take from you unless you want to give it to them. Hope that answers the question. Okay, let's move on. Okay, question for Amit Datta sir. Is there a specific algorithm that IPRS follows while calculating the rightful royalty amount? Could you throw some light on the technology behind?
Well, I think what IPRS, in my view, what IPRS does currently and is now expanding is appropriating a weightage amount. So there are different types of royalty that IPRS collects. One is an unlocked royalty pool, which comes from hotels and restaurants where you can't have a song list. So you can't attribute money to a single song title or 100 specific titles. The other is the logged list, which is your live performance, radio, TV, OTT streaming, YouTube, etc., where you can actually identify which are these titles. So for identified titles, there is a weightage that is attributed in terms of the amount of money that comes in into IPRS and is distributed accordingly. This is going to become much more easy and human hands free in the coming year when IPRS takes on the SOCAN generated data clef system, which is completely automated and much more transparent, right? From a distribution perspective, along with a members dashboard that will start off in June, July, which will allow a member like Manoj to look at his dashboard to see what his works are, to upload his works, and then eventually to see what his royalty statements are, how much money he's making, etc. So by the end of the year, we will have this system in IPRS, hopefully, in place to make it much more transparent. But right now, we are working on the time-tested weightage that is given to each work across a money pool, that is the amount of money that has been collected.
Okay, and if I can just add to that, so as Amit was explaining, there is logged income, which is very easy when it comes from your OTT platforms, radio, etc. There's a certain amount of money that the tracks are identified, they're paid accordingly, no issue. The issue really is about unlogged income, where you're going to restaurants, bars, clubs, and as he said, you can't actually identify it. So it's not just IPRS. Every collecting society in the world has to have what they call a distribution scheme by which they work out the algorithm you're talking about. That is suggested year on year, depending on the kind of formats that are in use, the kind of number of radio stations. So they have to use a sampling method of something, which then gets ratified by the AGM every year. So it's not a decision any executive or board takes in isolation. There is a methodology that is followed in arriving at the algorithm, and that algorithm then is approved by the annual general body meeting. So there is nothing arbitrary about it. And you also have to remember that collecting societies are under the purview of the government, and the government also does keep inspecting and making sure that they're being fair to third-party users. So that more than answers your question. Chalo, aage chalo. Okay. Shubho. In film, there is a trend, especially in the regional market, where a Bengali film producer takes rights from his Tamil counterpart to do a version of the same in Bengali. Can IPRS chip in as an important stakeholder of the industry so that it can collect a fee on behalf of the original script writer for the dramatic play? I think we kind of answered that. But,
yeah, it has been answered.
So, Manoj, you just want to go over what we said again? Just repeat that.
Yeah, because I brought up this question, and definitely there has to be. I mean, I totally feel from the bottom of my heart that there has to be some royalty for the script writers, for the dialogue writers, for the story writers. But as of now, since as Amit told that the drama thing is not included in the basic regulations, so script writers and dialogue writers and story writers are not entitled to the royalty as of now. I hope that the things will change in future.
Yeah, and IPRS is not governing these rights at the moment. So either they get included in the IPRS mandate, or a new society comes up for script writing and other dramatic works. Okay, so is that it? Do we have another question, or should we call it a wrap? That's it. Okay, thank you so much. Amit, thank you so much for that very, very enlightening session. And Manoj, it was a real pleasure having you and listening to your experiences, and also some great suggestions about what we can do going forward as an industry. So thank you both. It's been a great World Intellectual Property Day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. See you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.